People buy Androids for 3 reasons. They are cheaper than iPhone, easier to customize, and let you install from anywhere you want. But if you're watching this in 2026, 2 of these advantages are already gone, and the third one is on its way. On August 25th, 2025, Google announced one of the biggest turning points in Android's history. Google declared a war on sideloading, a decision that everyone called,
"If you lock these devices down, they become no better than Apple iPhone."
I don't use Android because I believe it is operational and functionally better. I use it because it gives me freedom.
You might as well just fucking buy an iPhone at that point.
This is the story of how Android lost its identity and how greed is destroying the #1 example of freedom, or as I like to call, the applification of Android. In 2005, Google bought Android. And yes, Google did not create Android from scratch, but bought it as a startup for $50 million, which can only be described as one of the best deals in the tech history. Google wanted a mobile operating system that wasn't controlled by a single company, one that is easier for developers to work on, where users could decide what they wanted to install and what they could modify in their devices. At that time, nobody understood why a search engine company was buying a phone software startup. Nokia and Motorola controlled almost half of the global mobile market, and that dominance gave Symbian OS a huge advantage, since it was used on nearly every Nokia phone. BlackBerry came second, and was mostly popular between business people. And Windows Mobile? Well, it's Windows Mobile. Years passed and Android partnered with HTC, and together they were secretly working on their first Android phone prototype. A phone that looked very similar to BlackBerry, with a physical keyboard, a small non-touch screen, and navigation buttons. HTC was making the hardware and Android the software. The phone was planned to hit the market in 2008, but just a year before, Apple dropped its first iPhone. Google and HTC knew that their prototype wouldn't even come close to the iPhone's features, so Google decided to scrap everything and rebuild from scratch. And after 1 year of hard work, the first Android finally hit the market, and finally, a worthy competitor to the legendary iPhone. Within 1 year of launch, Android was running on 25 different phone models across multiple manufacturers. But on the other hand, Apple had only one. The first Android phone had a physical keyboard that was sliding out, a trackball, and a user interface that looked like it was designed on extra time. But the best thing was that the phone was actually yours. You could install apps from outside the Android market, root the device, flash custom ROMs, or even change the entire operating system and nobody would care. And unlike iPhone, everything on Android was completely free, because Google didn't even have a payment system before 2009, let alone in-app purchases. The iPhone had these features from its first days, but all that changed when Samsung entered the game. For context, Samsung wasn't a fan of Android. In fact, Samsung was investing heavily in its own operating system, Bada, but it completely failed because of the heavy restrictions and developers were ignoring it. Samsung tried again with Tizen, but failed once more. So they ditched everything and went all in on Android. And within 4 years, Samsung became the biggest smartphone manufacturer in the world. And this is where the chaos began. While Apple was carefully building its walled garden, Android was literally the lawless Wild West. You wanted an app that wasn't allowed on the Play Store? Just check a box and install whatever you want from wherever you like. A game or app asking you to pay? Just sideload it from an online market or use Lucky Patcher. Not happy with how your phone looks? Just install a custom launcher and the whole interface will change. Samsung's TouchWiz was a bit laggy back then, and to fix that you didn't need to buy a new phone. Legends like CyanogenMod and AOKP even allowed you to customize things that the phone manufacturer itself wouldn't allow you to touch. This was literally the definition of buying is owning. But the big question here is, at what cost? Before we start this chapter, I want to share something special with you. Investing is one of the most boring things in life. You put money in a stock or asset, wait 40 years, and cash it out when you're 60. During these years, you're basically just staring at numbers going up and down while fees devour your earnings. But what if I told you that there is one company that rewards you points and travel benefits for just keeping those investments? What? Then meet today's sponsor, Silo Market. Silo Market is basically an interactive broker account, but with with a reward system. If you already invest in US stocks or ETFs and plan to hold them long term, Silo Market is literally your cheat code. Instead of just sitting and waiting for your investments to grow, Silo rewards you with points and benefits at no extra effort. Just by holding stocks and ETFs in your portfolio, you can earn the equivalent of 0.5% of your balance back in points every year. Silo has two membership plans. A gold plan that earns you up to 50,000 points every year, which is worth $500 if you want it in cash, and the platinum plan that earns you up to 250,000 points per year, which is worth $2,500 for literally just investing. And cash isn't the only option here. Silo will introduce travel partners soon, allowing you to redeem your points in flights, hotels, and other travel experiences. And to celebrate America's 250th anniversary, Silo is hosting a very generous and limited offer where new members can earn up to 250,000 bonus points for just signing up. And for safety, all Silo accounts are carried by Interactive Brokers, the largest brokerage platform in the world. Your securities receive up to $500,000 in SIPC protection and $5 million in FDIC insurance. So give them a check from the link in the description, and big thanks for Silo Markets for sponsoring today's video. Freedom sounds great until someone uses it against you. If you ever used Android back in the days, you probably heard of or even used an app called Lucky Patcher. But if you are not familiar with it, Lucky Patcher was a tool that couldn't be found on the Play Store. And if you wanted to install it, you had to download it manually from your phone browser. The idea behind it is simple. Imagine you're playing a game, and to get that cool skin, unlock the next level, or just get rid of the annoying ads, you had to spend some money. But with Lucky Patcher, you were literally scamming the app. When you click pay, you're actually paying Google, which pays the company behind it. And for the game to verify, it just asks Google if that person really paid. Lucky Patcher would intercept that question and confirm it by itself. At that time, if you wanted to scare any game developer, just mention Lucky Patcher.
Lucky Patcher.
For users, it felt like a cheat code, but for developers, it was a nightmare. The independent developers who spent months building games were watching their revenue fly with the wind. A Yankee Group survey found that roughly 1 in 3 Android developers reported losing more than $10,000 directly to piracy. And if the game developer relied only on ads instead of in-app purchases, Lucky Patcher could scan and locate those ads placements and wipe them out. Lucky Patcher wasn't alone on this. Happy Mode and AC Market built entire platforms around distributing modified APKs. If the app was paid on Play Store, you'd probably find it there for free. Thousands of apps, millions of downloads, heavy losses, all outside Google's scope. But piracy wasn't actually the bigger problem, because even if you disagree with Google and want complete freedom, you still need to have protection. And the biggest problem here was malwares. When you build an open system and let anyone install anything from anywhere, disasters start showing. In 2017, security researchers at Checkpoint Software discovered a virus called the Judy malware. The scary part is that this malware had quietly infected up to 36.5 million Android devices over just a few years. And what's scarier was that it came mainly through 41 apps on Google Play Store itself. Some of which had been there for years, passing every Google security check with no suspicions. And Judy was just one of many. By the time Android's malware problem was being openly discussed, the numbers were staggering. Reports found that apps installed outside the Play Store made users dramatically more likely to encounter a malware. Google would later claim that side-loaded apps were 50 times more likely to contain malware than Play Store apps. Developers were losing money, users were cracking and later crying, and Google was losing trust, but more importantly, money. The open ecosystem that had made Android great was slowly becoming an open wound that needs intervention. So Google here had to make a choice that Apple had already made from day one, a choice that would shape the entire identity of Android. If you watched my previous video about the amplification of Samsung, you'd probably remembered that after Apple's controversial move in the iPhone 7 and iPhone 12, where Apple removed the headphone jack and charger from the box and started selling its own earpods, the whole industry started an amplification trend. Apple removed the headphones and charger from the iPhone box, and nearly every smartphone manufacturer followed after. Apple proved that users would accept restrictions if the packaging was fancy. Just mention words like security and environment protection and people would accept it and move on. Android wasn't far from this, and from a quick observation, Google understood that Apple's iOS had no piracy and malware problems thanks to its stricter environment. Developers were making more, and Apple's earnings were growing too. So Google started moving. Malware appears, Google creates Play Protect. Modified apps, developers started requiring internet connection before you can even touch their app or games. Google also assisted with the Play Integrity feature that made it easier for developers to reduce cheating. Not only that, but Google also started making stricter guidelines for apps to be accepted, stronger content policies, and longer review process that didn't exist before. This was the first time in history where the gap between owning an Android and owning an iPhone started shrinking year after year. Phone manufacturers, on the other hand, started moving too. Samsung from its side locked its bootloaders and introduced Knox Security, the one you usually see when restarting your phone or booting it. Knox works like an invisible seal inside your phone. The moment you root or modify your system, that seal breaks and your phone is permanently gone. You can still use it and see the interface, but most apps and features will stop working. OnePlus went to the next level and betrayed its whole community back in 2025. OnePlus built its entire reputation on one idea. We are not Samsung, we are not Apple. We are the true Androids, the ones modders and developers love. The only company that made rooting phones easier than installing apps. Everything was perfect about OnePlus until the merge with Oppo, where massive and radical restrictions got introduced. All these moves and more made Android secured over the years. But on the other side, this was quietly destroying the core idea of Android. And when most people assumed it would stop there, Google came up with one of the biggest decisions in the tech history. A decision that crossed a line Android users thought was untouchable. A line that would change everything about Android. Sideloading is one of the biggest and most successful marketing lies made by Google and Apple. Because if we take a closer look on that term, it basically means that both Android and Apple has only two default app stores. And if you used any alternative way to download your app, you're taking the uncommon path. And to choke that path even more, Google came up with that controversial decision. So let me explain what exactly will happen. The normal path for a developer in the past was simple. Sign up for a Google Play console, pay the $25 fee, pass the security check, and upload the app. Within a few days, it would be available for download. If the developer refused to pay or preferred to not register with Google, he can just go to an online store or make his own and post his app there for free. You from your side download it from there, check install from unknown sources, and the app is ready to go. Probably most of us have done it at least once in the past. But with the new decision, this process will change drastically. From now on, every developer will be obliged to pay that $25 fee. Not only that, but also verify his identity with Google even if his app won't land on the Play Store. If the developer refused and didn't want to submit his ID, the installation process would be a complete nightmare. You have to enable developer mode, complete some security questions, restart the phone, and wait 24 hours to complete the process. From a security point, this move is a life-saving. Old people get pressured by scammers in calls to install applications that would steal their life-saving. This step will give them enough time to think, check that no one is guiding them, and make the right choice. But the darker side is that the ID requirement will cause a disaster for developers. If you're building an app for fun and want to share it with a friend, you have to verify and pay Google. If you're an activist or a privacy tool developer, your identity itself isn't private, meaning governments could just request it anytime. This will also scare modding developers from potential legal actions. Google won't use these IDs for anything other than security, but if a company wanted to sue a developer, it could request their identity from Google, and a court could order Google to provide it. Google will gain much more control after this, but it's not entirely wrong. The point here is that with all these restrictions, Android is slowly becoming one step away from being an iOS copy. So the real question here is Google protecting Android or just want more control? Let me know your opinion down in the comments. And if you want to debate more, you can join me on Discord from the link in the description. Subscribe and like, and thanks for watching.